Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
My name is Bruce Solheim, and I'm a history professor at Citrus College in Glendora, California. I'm also an author and a playwright, a musician, a comic book writer and publisher, and I've been teaching for over 30 years. It was only recently that I started publishing comic books, which has been my childhood dream. Comic books are the reason I learned how to read. So I owe a lot to comic books. So I'm really excited about this new comic book, Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter. And I'm excited to be working with Julia Kazanowska, who lives in Poland, as the artist on this project.
My name is Julia Kazanowska, like Bruce said, and I recently became a comic book illustrator because Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter is my first comic that I've ever illustrated. And this has also always been my dream, so I'm really happy to do that.
The introduction is pretty important, so it's just one page. This comic book, Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter, is dedicated to all the women in my life, past and present, who have helped me to be a better man. Thank you, Mom, Bestemor, which means grandmother in Norwegian, Ginger, Caitlin, Björg, Mary, Courtney, and my teachers at Kenmore and Lockwood Elementary Schools. You have in your hands, dear reader, the premiere issue of Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter. Henna Jekyll first appeared in Snark #2. She may be the first person of color lead character in comics who is not a superhero. I think this is a significant milestone for the genre. The creative team is slightly different than the Snark series. We have included a new artist, Julia Kazanowska, a young woman from Poland. As I write these words, her country is on the front lines of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The people of Poland have taken in millions of Ukrainian refugees, saving countless lives. I think you will enjoy Julia's artwork and see how it fits our character and story perfectly. As soon as I saw her illustrations by chance on Instagram, I knew she was the artist for Dr. Jekyll. We are lucky to have our talented and steadfast editor, George Barangos, on the Dr. J team as well. Our Snark artist colorist duo, Gary and Laura Dunn, will be back for Snark #3 in 2023. What else is cooking at Boots to Books Publishing, you might ask? Well, there's another graphic novel in the works entitled Gigline, which provides a more in-depth autobiographical and historical stories about yours truly. I have been and continue to be inspired by the late Harvey P. Karp and his autobiographical comic book, American Splendor. For Gigline, I fully embrace Harvey's quotidian point of view and channel this into a unique visual storytelling with the help of American Splendor alumnus Gary Dunn. As Harvey often said, ordinary life is pretty complex stuff. I think you will find Gigline a welcome addition to the comics you are already reading. So the first story in Dr. Jekyll is called Next Level. So all these stories in Dr. Jekyll are like 3, 4, 5 pages. And I'll just describe what's going on. You see Henna Jekyll, this young academician professor at Cleveland State University, and she is walking out of an elevator, and unbeknownst to her, there's 3 aliens in the elevator behind her. She's talking on the phone. Yeah, I need some time off. Definitive proof is hard to find. My dad said the aliens were all around us all the time. I'm not sure if I believe that. On the next page, we see Henna running to class. Why am I always late for class? And then there's a panel with her father, who on the blackboard behind him, it says, always be on time. 2, trust yourself. 3, the truth is out there. And 4, consciousness is primary. Henna's dad, Dr. Henry Jekyll, was never late. His lectures were always well prepared. Then she enters the classroom exhausted, out of breath, and the students are commenting, she's late, let's go. Classroom teaching was challenging. Henna often wondered how her dad maintained his popularity and rigorous standards as a professor. A student asks, "How do you know for sure that aliens exist?" Hannah, exasperated, "We'll go over that next time." Thinking back to her father, she talks about her life. "Mother died when I was 5. Dad was also an anthropologist. He loved to tell stories and studied ancient aliens. I guess you would say that I took up the family business. Although all of his students at Cleveland State loved him, my father was ridiculed by his colleagues and the administration. He was eventually forced into retirement. I hope to continue his work and prove that aliens do exist." I show a picture there of her father being escorted out of the college, and she's yelling at the administration, "Leave my father alone. This is unfair." This is the last page. It's a picture of Hannah and her father in the background. She says, "Hannah's father was very proud of Hannah when she was granted tenure at Cleveland State. They had planned on conducting alien research together and travel the world." And then there's a picture of Hannah at the graveyard with her mom and dad's graves. But as so often happens in life, the pinnacle of joy was quickly followed by the depth of sorrow. And then the last panel shows Hannah and her father on Easter Island. Hannah missed her dad every day, but she realized she had to carry on the work. The memories of their trips together sustained her. Their journey to Easter Island shortly before his death left a deep imprint on Hannah. And behind Hannah, there's an alien touching her shoulder, but she doesn't know it. So that's the first story.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. It is exciting. I have two amazing guests with us today, and we're getting ready to kick this off. Hi, Mr. Bruce. Hi, Miss Julia. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Miss Julia?
I'm also good, thanks.
I am so glad you guys are here, Miss Julia. Thank you for joining us besides the crazy time zone schedule. So I appreciate you both. I'm going to jump right in. I have a whole bunch of questions. It's a comic book. We have the author, we have the illustrator, which normally we don't get the pleasure, which is really, really fun. Let's start with the background. Dr. Bruce, tell us, where did this story come from? Why did you start it? You gave us a glimpse that she's a character in another book. Why?
Yeah, the first comic book I published in 2019 was called Snark. And Snark originated actually when I was still in the Army in 1981. And I was working in a guard tower in West Germany at a military prison. And I was bored and I was writing in my notebook, as I so often did. And I drew a picture of an alien. It was an alien hybrid character, and I called him Snark. Well, I had this idea for a story, but I never really did anything until I got out of the military. And in 1982, I was in engineering school at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana. And I asked the school newspaper if I could do a comic strip, and I called it Snark. And that's where that character emerged. I did 5 of those comic strips, and then I dropped out of engineering school. And then I went back in the military later and went to flight school and all that. So 37 years later, I actually published the Snark comic book like I always wanted to do. And then in the second edition of Snark, Snark number 2, a character came to me named Hannah Jekyll. She was going to be a college professor like myself, and she was going to be following in her father's footsteps as a researcher, extraterrestrial researcher, which kind of mimics a little bit what I've gone through since I started writing about my paranormal experiences in 2017. So the character is kind of interesting because I thought I want a unique character, and I feel like I'm a playwright too. And I think every character deserves a really deep backstory that you can reveal and make her very interesting. Well, she was so interesting as a background character in Snark 2. It was just begging for a comic book to come out with her. And like I mentioned before, there's very few comic books where you have a female lead character, and that's not a superhero. So she's not a superhero. She's super smart. So I just thought she was a fun character. And so the character is kind of a composite of a lot of the women that have been important to me in my life. And then she has a cat that helps her too. And I love cats, even though we don't have any animals because my wife is very allergic. But I have cats in my life and I feel very close to them. So Hannah has a camp that helps her with their research, believe it or not. So that's where she kind of emerged. And then I needed to find an artist who could really capture this very strong female spirit in Dr. Jekyll. And I originally thought I wanted Gary Dunn, who illustrated Snart, to do it, but he wasn't available. So then I think fate decided I needed to find somebody else, hopefully a female artist, which just so happened was Julia. I just happened to see her artwork on Instagram, and the rest is history.
And Miss Julia, this is a great opening to jump right into you. When Bruce proposed this idea to do a comic book, how did you decide to be like, yes, I'm going to do it? Did you have to think about it? How did that work?
So I was definitely very surprised when he reached out to me on Instagram because I've been publishing my art online for quite a long time, but I never expected to get a job offer just out of that. I was surprised, but also very happy because I've always liked the comics and I've always thought about illustrating one day. So I was very happy, but I didn't instantly agree. I first talked with Bruce more. We met on Skype once to talk things through, and then we were talking via email. After a few emails, I agreed to illustrate for him.
So, for our listeners, this entire conversation and business deal took over email. Like, honestly, we take for granted the power of communication and the time that we live in. Because, Bruce, where are you located? Let's put places and scenes together. Where are you at?
I live in Glendora, which is in Southern California, about an hour east of Los Angeles in the San Gabriel Mountains. So very hot here.
So is Texas. And Miss Julia, where are you in Poland located?
So I'm very near Krakow. That's at the south Poland. And I have to say it's also kind of hot here in the season.
So for everybody, put it in perspective. We have continents apart, you have oceans apart, you have time zone differences. And not to mention Miss Juliet not only is a first time published illustrator, she's only in her 20s, which is absolutely amazing and brilliant. So when things are meant to be and you put your heart and soul into it, you'd be surprised at miracles that happen. So for both of you, congratulations. I
Thank you.
love this book. It is super, super fun. Miss Julia, since we're talking about the illustration, how long did it take you to put this book together?
So it was about a year. Bruce reached out to me on summer 2021, but we didn't instantly start to work on the comic. First, we talked, and well, Bruce wanted to start on fall, so that when we started, it was about like September. And first, I was doing sketches, something like storyboards of the comic. And when he gave his corrections, I started to, well, simply illustrate, finalize the pages. And that took about a year because we finished on May 2022.
This is a very intense process for everybody. Mr. Bruce, how many panels does the book have in terms of the actual physical? Because you're looking at every page being illustrated. How many pages are you looking at?
Yeah, this book is 60 pages. The panels on each page varies from a single panel splash to maybe 4 or 6 panels, but 60 pages of illustration. So that's a lot. It takes a lot of work. Well, it starts off with a storyboard. I'm a frustrated comic book artist, so I'll give her some of my ideas in a storyboard form or a mock-up, as I call it. And then she does the panels and the illustrations and does everything. I mean, it's just a suggestion, what I send her, along with the narration and then she makes it look really good. And even though she's only 20 years old, she has a really good grasp on sequential art, which is a lot harder than you think. A lot of people think, oh, I'll just draw 4 boxes on a page, draw some stuff in each box. But that doesn't really capture the story. And then you can't be redundant. The words can't say exactly the same the picture is saying. Otherwise, it's kind of redundant. I mean, sometimes it reflects it, but can sometimes be part of the humor, and it could be in the visual, maybe not in the narrations or the dialogue. or vice versa. So it really is a very delicate dance between and the structure of the panels. And high praise has come for Julia from Gary Dunn, who did Snark. And Gary's been illustrating comics professionally since the early 70s. And he is extremely impressed with Julia's work. And I think that says a lot. That's kind of the process. And each story is about 3 to 5 pages. And that's just the way I write. I think it's kind of like maybe based on, I'm a playwright. So scenes, they're kind of like scenes. And that's the way I look at it. Even when I write plays, each scene has a title. A lot of playwrights don't do that. They'll just say scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. But I capture the scene with the title. And that's what I've done in Dr. Jekyll. And Julia's just went along with that and captured that. Those preliminary sketches in that summer of last year, she was getting comfortable with the character and kind of, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And it worked out so well. She just has really captured the spirit of this character. And I know that just like a writer puts themselves into the characters and that dialogue between who you're writing about and they talk back to you, although it sounds schizophrenic, it's not. That's the writing process. I think the artist does the same thing. Julia, and she can speak for herself, but just my idea is that the artist also puts themselves in the place of the character and captures it, the movements and the gestures and everything. So, but maybe she can talk more about that, but she's done a beautiful job with it.
Do you agree with that, Julia? What do you think of that description?
Yeah, it's true, at least for me. I think it's pretty much necessary in order to illustrate a story accurately, to put yourself into the characters, to try to feel what they feel, and to imagine all the situations, how they would look in real life. And yeah, I do that. I hope that I can pull it off well. It helps to both create accurate character expressions, but also body language. I think it's necessary to illustrate everything accurately.
Awesome. What made you decide to have a superhero without any superpowers? Like she is the heroine of this book. She's getting ready to tackle this. It has no powers. Why?
Yeah, I just wanted to break away from the superhero genre. I have nothing against the superhero genre. I mean, that's how I learned how to read was Marvel Comics. So that's fine. But I kind of agree with Harvey Pekar, who's my comic writing mentor, who did the American Splendor series in the 70s and 80s. And there was a movie made about his life, award-winning movie in 2003. He believed that ordinary life is pretty complex stuff. So I think there's enough there in our lives to make interesting stories. And then when you add some of the magical elements, magical realism, and it's not that magical anymore, I guess, or preposterous because we see Congress investigating UFOs and stuff. So it's maybe on the fringe for a lot of people, but they can kind of buy into it. I think there's really complex, interesting stories within all of our lives. And like I always tell my history students, we're all making history. And you have to look at life that way. Each of us contributes a part. I think Walt Whitman said that all of us contribute a verse to life. And if we respect that and honor that, we take great care in what we do. I just think she's an interesting character from many different respects, and she's very relatable. And I think it's especially important for me since I have a daughter that's 26 now. I always want to impress upon her that how important she is. And I thought it'd be cool to have a comic book character that young people, young girls especially, could read and see themselves in that character. So there's a lot of things that went into that I thought was important.
I love the message and the fact that is relatable, that people can see themselves in this character without having to say, well, she can do these things because she has this power. She has this magic.
Mhm.
Miss Julia, what was the hardest part for you to draw this comic book? What did you find most challenging?
Definitely, it was challenging that I never worked on a comic before, and I didn't really know how exactly that process looks. So it was new to me. And working with Bruce was really nice, and he's really nice to work with. It wasn't hard, but it was also new to me. At the beginning, I was always pretty stressed out if I do everything correctly and if I'm going to illustrate this right or whether or not I will do some mistake. But I've learned a lot and I'm really happy that I did that. And besides that, what was challenging? Definitely the time, because I'm also studying at college. I do other things, and especially at the beginning, I worked slower. Later, I managed to develop myself a process and my drawing time speed up, especially at the beginning. That was challenging. Later, I developed a routine and it became much easier and less stressful for me.
That is awesome. I'm glad that the process got much more comfortable and that you actually took on this whole entire new project that you're going, I've never done this, but I want to try it. Is this the last we're going to see of Dr. Jekyll? Are you guys planning to do more? Tell us.
I have in my hands here rough drafts of stories for Dr. Jekyll #2. So some of which Julia has seen and some that I haven't sent her yet. So yeah, we're already agreed to work on Dr. Jekyll #2, and who knows after that. And I just want to add to what Julia said. She said something very important. I think that young women especially need to know. And this comes from some wisdom I got from the former prime minister of Norway. I was Facebook friends with her. I got to meet her in person. Ginger, my wife, and I got to meet with her in her prime minister's office. And I knew her when she was a very young member of parliament. And anyway, she told me it's very important for young women when they get an opportunity to trust themselves and say yes to the opportunity. Because oftentimes young women feel like, well, I'm not quite ready. I need more experience. I need that. And she used her example, Erna Solberg, the prime minister of Norway, used her example of how when she became party leader, she was only in her 20s. And she said, oh, I'm too young to do this. And they said, no, we want you to do it. And then she said yes. And then she learned very quickly. And then when she became prime minister, she was one of their youngest prime ministers. And she just said, I'm not ready. And they said, well, yeah, I think you are. And though she said yes, and she was very successful. And she was prime minister for like 12 years. So that was the lesson I impart to my students. I mean, it's important for everybody, but especially for young women. Women have a tendency to be a little more cautious. Guys are taught to be very assertive. And I'm not saying it's always that case, but it's very true. And guys will just jump in. They don't even know what's going on and they don't think anything about it. That's how we're taught. And for a lot of young women, they're taught, well, be careful, make sure you're prepared. And sometimes you just have to jump into it. And Julia jumped into it with both feet. She might have thought maybe it was a challenge, and it is always a challenge doing these projects, but she said yes, and I'm glad she did.
That is an amazing advice for young women, for young authors and illustrators. Sometimes the hardest thing is to say yes to ourselves. It's
Mhm.
to say yes to an opportunity because sometimes we've been taught that it might be too big. What happens if you fail? Well, what happens if you don't even try? So, congratulations again, Mr. Bruce. Tell us, where can our listeners find the book? Where they can learn more about both of you? So, I'll ask both of you, where can they get the book and more information about each one of you?
Okay, you can get the book on Amazon as both an e-comic or a print book. So you can get it on Amazon. All my information's on my website, bruceolavsolheim.com. So everything else I've done, the Snark series, all my paranormal books, all the everything that I've written, plays and so forth.
Awesome. And Ms. Julia, where can they find more about you? Where anybody interested in getting a commission piece from you, where can they get it?
So I have the biggest online presence on Instagram under the nickname Faded Iris. It's sometimes hard for people to spell, but I hope it will be okay. I haven't posted a lot recently due to a lot of work, but I plan to go back, but I want to go back for good. So that's why it takes me time. And yeah, I have my email on Instagram where you can email me for work if you want to. And you can also message me on Instagram with pretty much everything.
Awesome. I love it. So before you both leave me, because you guys have tons of stuff going on, are you guys ready for the lightning round?
Oh, sure. Why not?
Easy peasy, because I have two of you. What I'll do is I'll ask one question of one and one of the other, and then the last question will be for both. So let's start that way. So, Mr. Bruce, don't think too hard on these, please. Whatever comes into your mind, soda or juice?
Juice.
Miss Julia, Fruit or vegetable?
Fruit.
Bruce, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
You didn't have to think about that. You're like, I'm on this.
I read your mind.
I see. I was like, oh, Julia, summer or winter?
Winter.
I admire you because I'm officially like, I'm a fall kind of girl. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start with this one. And since we're talking about a comic, this seemed to be a very interesting question for the day. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And we'll start with Bruce.
Boy, that's always a tough one, but I would say invisibility.
Really?
Yeah.
Hi.
Well, I could verify what I suspect is going on in the corridors of power.
I like that. Miss Julia, what would your superpower be?
And I always like the superpowers connected to manipulating time. So if I could stop the time for a while, I mean, a while wouldn't exist then, but you could basically do anything then. You could have all the time in the world. I could, most basic thing, practice drawing for eternity and become the best possible you could.
Like that. I always think travelers, but time manipulation is really good too. Do you guys have any closing remarks for us? Anything you guys want to share?
Like I said, especially for young women, but for all young people, trust yourself and say yes to opportunities and be ready for all opportunities. Don't just think that one thing is all you got. You got a lot of different skills and be ready to use any of them. So anything that you're learning could come in handy, maybe not now, but eventually it will. So learn from as many people as you can. And that goes for older people too. You're always learning.
I love it. And Miss Julia, any closing remarks?
So if I were to add to this message for young people, then I would say definitely never give up despite all your failures or even if you do mistakes, because this is just the way to learn and to eventually achieve.
To our listeners, those are beautiful messages. Please, please follow your dreams and believe in yourself. You guys are meant for greatness. Mr. Bruce, Miss Julia, thank you so much for joining me. It has been such a pleasure. I have had
Thank you.
so much time. Congratulations on the book again. I can't wait for book number 2. So make sure you guys hit us back. We want to have you guys back on the show. To our listeners, go ahead, follow both of these amazing and talented artists. Make sure you guys check out the book. If you are not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do it. Give us some love. Share with somebody. You guys know we're always better when we're growing together. If you want to join the Patreon community, the link is on the information as well. And I will see you guys again for another amazing author. Bye, everyone.